ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for being here. We are super thrilled, especially I know it's a tough time with final exams and holiday season coming up, so I really appreciate you all being here, especially to our panelists for taking time to be here as well. We have cookies and coffee out there for anyone who just needs a little bit of an afternoon boost, which I totally understand. This is the book publishing workshop, and so folks who have done a lot of research and they've published in journals before, but publishing a book is something different. It's a different bear. So we have, and I'm going to do these introductions, but that does not capture the full extent that these wonderful faculty members have their impact that they've made to the university. So just to preface that, and also we will be passing the mic. So we only have one mic, so I'm sorry in advance that there will be some passing. It'll be a little bit staccato. Okay, so first we have Melissa Gross. So Dr. Melissa Gross is a professor in the School of Library and Information Studies and former president of the Association for Library and Information Science Education. Her research areas include information-seeking behavior, information literacy, and information resources for youth, and she has been at FSU since 1999. Dr. Gross has received many awards, including the American Association of University Women Recognition Award and the Outstanding Faculty Member Award at FSU. She has written dozens of journal publications and published 8 books. Her last one is in press right now, from publishing houses including the American Library Association, Scarecrow Press, and Neil Schumann Publishers, and her work has been translated into Chinese and Arabic. We have Thomas Joyner. Thomas Joyner is the Robert O. Lawton Distinguished Professor of Psychology here at FSU and has been at the university since 1997. His research interests focus on suicidal behavior and related conditions. He has received multiple accolades, including the Distinguished Research Professorship, Cottrell Family Endowed Professorship, and most recently, the Distinguished Scientist Lecturer from the American Psychological Association. He has written over 500 journal articles and has published or edited 17 books from publishing houses, including Harvard University Press, Oxford University Press, and Palgrave Macmillan. David Kirby. So Dr. Kirby is an accomplished writer and poet and is the Robert O. Lawton Distinguished Professor of English at FSU. He has received honors for his work, including fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation and the National Endowment for the Arts, and his work appears frequently in Best American Poetry. He has received multiple honors at FSU, including the Distinguished Teacher Award and the College of Arts and Sciences Teaching Award. He is the author of over 20 books, most recently Talking About Movies with Jesus, and his selected poetry collection, The House on Boulevard Street, was nominated for the 2007 National Book Award in Poetry. Devon Sober is here from the FSU Libraries, where he is a scholarly communications librarian. He oversees initiatives related to the FSU Research Repository and Open Access Publishing Fund, and is also responsible for advancing the library's copyright support and journal publishing programs. Devon came to FSU from the University of British Columbia this year, where he served as an intellectual property and copyright librarian. So thank you all for being here. So I have a couple of questions to ask our wonderful panelists, and then I will open it up to the audience, and you guys can ask them questions that you have. So the first question, this is for everyone. I'm sorry, Devon, you'll probably speak at the end. So all of you are from very different fields. So in the book publishing, how did you know where to start, and what has been the evolution of your publishing? So how did you know where to start, and what has been the evolution of your publishing?
I think I was very lucky because my major professor invited me to co-author a book with her when I was finishing my PhD. And so I had, I think, probably the best kind of start that that you can have. And I learned a lot from her about the process and about what writing a book actually entails. I later went out on my own and learned more, like, sort of along my way. I always liked the idea of publishing a book, of having a book with my name on it. It sounds silly, but it's meant a lot. It's meant a lot to me. But I think most of what I've learned since has been learned by doing. And at this point, I've published books by myself. I've had published books with many different co-authors. I have a co-author in the audience here, Don Latham. And I've turned around and done books with my own PhD students. And the book that is being published this spring is actually again with my major professor, so kind of coming full circle with that.
I'm a professor of psychology, and the sort of coin of the realm in our business is twofold. One is literally coins in the form of grant money, federal grant money, and the other is journal articles. And books are not really in there very much. They're low on the pecking order. And so I really do it for that reason. If I were to do it for reasons of professional advancement or development, it would be grants and articles, and definitely I've done my share of that too. But the book thing for me, just sort of similarly, it attracted me because of a little bit of the freedom of the format. Journal article format's a little constrained for me, and so I've really enjoyed that part. The other part, though, is it's sort of a compulsion, and not always, like a lot of compulsions, not always the best one. It's like smoking a little bit sometimes, I'll say, where, it's pleasant. It's a pleasant thing to do. It can't really help it sometimes. Generally, though, it could be unwise to do. That's kind of how I feel about writing books. Sometimes kind of unhealthy, but don't really have much of a choice. It just it feels like a compulsion. As to the evolution of it or the development of it, it has been fun to stick with material that's at a pretty high level, but talk about it in ways, learn how to talk about it in ways that's very general. And that took several books to get good at that. And now I feel like I've just now hit stride on that. So that's been a fun, I've enjoyed that part of the development.
Do I really need this? Can you hear me back in the back? Is it okay?
It's got to go into it's going into the thing.
Oh, it's going into the thing. Okay, I will honor and respect the thing then, but still speak loudly. Yeah, you can see how high tech I am. It's. I hope Professor Joyner will agree with me when I say it's maybe good to have certain tendencies without being always at the other end of the spectrum, and I've always suspected that I have graphomaniacal tendencies. I'm not a graphomaniac, because if I were a graphomaniac, I would be describing you and writing everything down and not living my life. But I'm going to write something later on today. Supposedly, our former governor and Senator Bob Graham writes down everything on cards and gives them to staffers. Social events on blue cards, Senate debates are on green cards, and somewhere in Melbourne, Florida, there's a warehouse full of cards stored somewhere. That's graphomania. That's going too far. But it helps if you either like to write or can't help writing. Kate, you asked how do we know what to do and when to do it. I think it was Kant who said that Isaac Newton can tell you what he did and take you through the steps to where he got, but Homer could not only not tell you how he got there, but he couldn't take you back through the steps, which is kind of how I felt. If you have seen my name or heard my name outside of this room, it's connected with the word poetry, which I always wrote. My first memories are of doing that. But when I got here, I really wasn't writing the kinds of poems that I wanted to write. But I had a family, and I needed to get tenure, so I'd gone and taken a regular PhD at Johns Hopkins and written a dissertation on the novels of Henry James. So I published in that field, and I started doing a lot of bibliographies because I've always loved reference books, and for some reason they were very well reviewed in Scotland, and even within Scotland, for some reason, all of these bibliographies published a lot with Scarecrow, which is, they put a lot of meals on the table. My books were popular in Scottish library journals. So I would always imagine these Scottish librarian conventions with guys in kilts smoking their pipes and saying, "Hi, that Kirby, he's a good lad." And meanwhile, I was over here in Tallahassee trying to figure out how to write poetry, and when I figured out how to do that, the poetry books began to appear, and the bibliographies kind of died out. So then I imagine those guys saying, Kirby, whatever happened to that lad, But I hope they bought the poetry books, and it just, sort of gradually, like an eclipse, that sort of took over my career. But I still write on literature, still write on cultural affairs. About 10 years ago, when you're a poet, you start out in absolute obscurity, and then the best you can do is to leap to relative obscurity. And I'm there. I'm now relatively obscure, which means that within the poetry realm, people know what I'm doing, and people would ask me to make statements or do visits or write for the New York Times Book Review. And like this? Okay. And we can start over again if you like. Yeah. I love poetry. I read it and write it every day, but I'd been doing it for such a long time, and I got tired of sort of saying what poetry is. So I decided to reinvent myself as a music journalist, and contacted some people, and began to. I wrote a book on Little Richard, for example, and cover live concerts, and write for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Wall Street Journal, New York Times again, Washington Post. And I'm just as I'm the ultimate recycler with my poems. You write a poem, and then you can get 40 of them and make a book. I've done the same thing with my music writing. I said I wrote the little book, and you're looking here at Crossroad: Artist, Audience, and the Making of American Music, which is a collection of those pieces that I've been writing for the last 10 years. Just out, 14 shopping days left till Christmas. Thank you for this opportunity. Available from Amazon. But I think what puts everything together, what combines, well, there's some things like that, but I'm going to give the microphone to Devon here in a second. I think what you want to do when you write a book, no matter whether it's a cookbook or a auto repair manual or something else, is just sort of look up at the shelf where that book will be, and there's kind of a glowing space, with smoke and laser beams coming out of it, where exists the book that hasn't been written yet. And you're going to write that book. So every one of my books, and there are a lot more than 20 by now, there'll be more by next week probably. Every one is one I hope, maybe not all my reviewers would agree, maybe in Scotland they would, but I want every one of them to be the book that hasn't been written yet and that everybody needs to have.
Thanks very much, David. Unlike my illustrious co-panelists, I've never published a book, so I'll keep my comments on this question relatively brief. As a librarian, I love books and always have. I think that's something that I share with all of my colleagues at FSU libraries. And I'm very excited and grateful to be working in a position and with people that allow me to explore the economics and trade of book publishing from afar or at one remove, and to think about novel and innovative ways of supporting faculty in their aspirations to publish books. Hopefully I'll get a chance to talk about some of those later.
You have a question right here, please. I'm so sorry about the passing of the mic. So if you guys haven't covered this already, how did you know who to contact? And what publishing houses do you go to? Do you have an agent or an intermediary, or do you just cold call? Like, what's the process?
I don't have an agent. I guess it's a cold call process. Every book that I've done, I go to see who's publishing in my area. Typically the books I'm reading will tell me who's interested in the kind of thing that I'm interested in writing. And I've contacted acquisitions editors at different publishing houses, engaged them in conversation, and that's, I think, the way each book has resulted. One thing I wanted to tell you was, at least in my field, you don't have to have written the whole book in order to get the book published. And I think this is something people don't always consider, that you can float ideas and talk about ideas and shape ideas with an editor that will result in a book and a book contract without your really ever giving them, a chapter to go on. And the more books that I've produced, usually the less they want from me before they agree to do the book. So I think it's really important to know who your audience is and to know who your competition is. So who else is writing in your area? What does your book offer that the other books don't offer? To help you make your case with the editor about the importance of the particular idea that you have. But I would say don't be afraid to talk to editors. That was a nice thing for me about starting with my professor in the beginning was, she could take care of all of these logistics for me. And I was pretty frightened of editors in the beginning, really afraid of looking foolish or thinking that, I couldn't really negotiate things, whatever they said had to go. But down the line I've learned that, I can impact things as they go along. I can have a say in what the cover looks like. I can change things in the contract, and I really didn't know that at first, and I think I had to develop the confidence along the way to know that I have a little more power in this situation, and you would have a little more power in this situation than I thought I did at first.
There's our professional association is called the American Psychological Association, and it's huge. It's like 150,000 people in it, and they run a big publishing outfit. So that just made obvious sense for me to go to them for my first books. So I did that and learned the ropes just along the way, talking to people, just learned about contacts and acquisition editors and other people, mostly at university presses. You asked about agents. I had an agent for this one popular book I wrote, and the agent was great, but the process of not doing a university book and doing a popular book wasn't for me. The control that they wanted over that book, they even changed the title of it, to that level. I didn't really appreciate. So I don't think I'm going to do that again. What I am going to do is go with these outfits like Harvard and Yale and Oxford, who these days are publishing a lot of popular books, and so try to go through those avenues to do the popular stuff and still keep it, reasonably scholarly. For all those books with Harvard and Oxford, etc., I don't have an agent, just dealing directly with the editor. But for that popular book, I did.
I want to pick up on what Melissa was saying. To me, the process is just a lot of jawboning. You contact people and pick the people you want to contact with some care, but pick a lot of them. There's nothing wrong with talking to half a dozen or more presses at one time, and pick your words carefully. I always think of like being the good undergraduate, not the undergraduate who writes and says, I wasn't in class last week, did I miss anything, the important, but the one who writes and somehow creeps under your garden. The next thing you know, you're knocking yourself out to do something for this kid, this adorable kid who has wormed his or her way into your heart just through their rhetoric. So just a simple email, in a couple of sentences, you can tell when somebody's conning you or not. And when you write an editor, they can tell whether you've got the goods or not. The kind of language you use, and track record's not bad either. But it's sort of like you can't work on the boat unless you have a union card, but you can't get a union card unless you work on the boat. You have to start somewhere. But it's I've spent a lot of time just morosely roaming the stacks and pulling books out and saying, oh, this looks like the kind of place that does what I want to do. And a big break for me is when I learned I could talk back to editors. Even like a journal editor says, you need to change this, and you write back, and you don't say not going to do it, but you say, oh, gee, what a good idea. Here's my idea, and then you kind of repeat what you have in there originally. So all the deviousness that only English majors and English professors know, but I try. There are two things that I really like. One is an advance, and most. A lot of people won't offer you an advance, and you say, can I get some, but you don't say, I want money because I like money. You say, I need some money to do some research from this, can I get that? And in fact, my Little Richard book was published in 2009, so that was 6 years ago, and I just got a recent royalty statement. My royalties this year are minus $75, so as soon as I sell X number of copies and make something, I'll get my advance back, and the publisher will stop glaring, toward Tallahassee. But I talked them out of enough money to do some things with it. And then another very sweet thing is, if you can get this, is a pre-publication contract. You know, I would much rather write a book after, when someone is saying that they're going to publish it, than I would just, writing a book. I can see some people nodding, say, writing a 600-page book, and then say, hey, anybody want to publish this thing? I only spent 8 years on it. And again, that's something that, you should be fearless about talking about. All of your hopes and dreams will be shot down, but sometimes they take the forms of new hopes and dreams. So just, start talking and be bold, and say things people want to hear, and they'll probably listen to you.
Thanks, David. I just wanted to latch on to a few of the comments made by the other co-panelists, in particular about cold calling and reaching out to different publishing houses and editors at those houses. I wondered if many people in the audience know that they have subject specialists at the library who are in charge of acquisitions for particular fields and disciplines, who have intimate knowledge of the range of publishing houses that are active in particular fields. Those might be good people to speak to get a sense for the main publishers in your field if you aren't already familiar with that kind of thing. Also, contracts, particularly when it comes to journal publishing. One of the services that we provide at the library is assistance with reviewing and negotiating publication contracts, because in many cases authors are so pleased to be accepted for publication that they sign on the dotted line as a matter of formality, and don't necessarily realize that they have a lot of power in that situation, and can ask for better intellectual property rights and to retain better rights going forward. So we can definitely help with that as well. And also in terms of job boning and reaching out and building a network and connections, we're hosting an academic publishing symposium next year, February 25th, and we'll have the president of the University Press of Florida, who's also currently I believe the president of the Association of American University Presses, Meredith Babb. She'll be there. We'll have representatives from Sage and other publishers as well. So that would be a great opportunity to meet people who are active in the field and make those connections.
So I know that several of you have already kind of touched on this, but how much editing did you do, and did you have your book written already, or did you get the publishing worked out before you actually started the writing, or has that changed over time?
I think in every case for me, I had the contracts before I actually wrote the book. There might have been one instance where I gave a first chapter along with it, but mostly the idea was sold before I actually started working on it. I think I answered that.
Yeah, definitely. Same with me. It's hard to imagine writing. It's kind of like what David said a little bit ago. You just spend 600 pages in 8 years without knowing an outcome. That's kind of hard to imagine. So getting that, sort of promise, so to speak, to a degree up front makes sense to me. All mine have been like that. One thing that's interesting, David talked about the advance. Something that I've learned over the years, for me personally, depends on your individual psychology a little bit, but for me, a big advance I've learned over the years ends up being a deterrent to motivation. I'd rather they offer that at some point and then backload it, give me a little bit up front, and then backload it so that I have an incentive to go get the rest of that at the end. If I get it all up front, I just lose. I lose a little bit of motivation. That'll depend. A lot of people won't, but I do. So that's one way to do it. And the other thing, though, about them promising it sooner or later to pay that is it shows their commitment to the project. Like they're invested in it literally, and knowing that, I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, and another thing, thank you for saying that, Thomas, because with this book, and now there are only 13 and a half you smartphone users out there during the dull moments, you can buy online. When these guys gave me, they offered an advance, and I thought, yippee for a while. And then I thought about that. I didn't think it would discourage me, but I thought, is there another thing to do besides just get the money and spend it? And so I contacted them, and I said, look, how about you give me half of that and use the other half for advertisement? And so they, and not just in scholarly journals, but in music magazines or cultural magazines like Oxford American. And they said that makes sense to us. So that's another angle that I came up with on my own. What was the question? Something like, do you write your books before you write them, or some? Basically, right? Yeah. Another thing, every prose book I've written has been preceded by a proposal, which is it's like a grant proposal, and I don't know whether I'm just making this up, or whether it's just kind of double whammy, woo-woo, juju, voodoo ideas in my mind. But my feeling is that editors like to see proposals with lots of parts. So, beautiful cover page, a sort of table of contents of the proposal, an abstract that states what it's going to be, a fuller, fleshing out of what it's going to be, a sample table of contents of the actual work, 2 chapters of the book, works cited page, partial works cited page, biography of the author. So give them, every one of my books has appeared, prose books that has appeared, has done it because I sent somebody a 15 or 20 page proposal that apparently caught their eye. But I think maybe this is continuing the question, or maybe this is a follow-up, but I think everyone here will tell you that there's a lot of writing after the writing. The most irritating author in the world is Barbara Hamby, who is my wife, who will work on something forever and then go back and rework it. And I say, it's perfect, send it out. And she wrote a book. She's bilingual. I just speak poetry, but she speaks poetry and fiction. She does both. I don't know how she crosses the aisle. But a book of stories of hers won the University of Iowa Short Fiction Prize a few years ago. I said, well, good for you. Let's go out and celebrate. And she says, well, I got to get back to work. And I said, well, what does that mean? Barbara was born in Hawaii. She was an Army brat and a military brat. And she spent the ages 10 to 18 in Hawaii. So the book is set in Hawaii, but she's not Hawaiian. She's not a Kama'aina. She's not a native. So she, by contacting this person and that person and another person, she finally found Normie. Now, Normie, for Normie to go to another island is a big deal. He spent his entire life on Oahu, knows everything about all the the Filipino culture, the Paniolo culture, the Kama'aina culture, every culture, what people eat, those 28 letter names of fishes with apostrophes, sprinkled here and there. He knows all that stuff. So Barbara contacted Normie, and they sent chapters back and forth. The book didn't appear for another 2 years because of Normie, who extracted from our bank account, the Little Richard advance plus more. But the book is a beautiful book, and everybody who's read it loves it. And even though it was written, it was at least partially written after it was written.
Thanks, David. I guess just latching on to, again, some of the comments that were made about proposals and some of the need to provide like an advance of your own in terms of the goods in order to get accepted for publication or an offer. Again, librarians would be, I think, a valuable resource in that regard in terms of being able to assist with research on, particularly with academic and scholarly books to determine or help you determine whether or not someone else has written a book on your topic, that kind of thing.
And I would be happy to, and maybe others would as well. If anybody wants to see a proposal, a humanities proposal, I could send one along.
And if anyone wants to see one that's more social science, I'd be happy to share it too.
So what is one piece of advice you'd give someone new to publishing their work in a book? One piece of advice.
Well, to do it, if you have the inclination, I think you absolutely should follow it and give it a go. I think you do need to do some research, and it sounds like the library is a good help there in terms of finding, the right publisher, the right person. Lots of times, you can find people to talk to at professional association meetings. Don't know if you've thought about that very much. But usually there are publishers at your professional association conferences, and they're kind of standing around till somebody talks to them. So they can tell you, what kinds of things they're looking for, and where they see the gaps in their own collections, and you can learn a lot from them, as well as make contacts that can be useful to you later. You might also ask colleagues in your department, or for advice or about what their process was. Talking to people, I think, is really valuable, and shared experience can really help a lot.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about just the one piece of advice that I would choose. It's a tough question. My mind gets pulled towards the writing itself. I actually think this part, talking to people, cold calling editors, dealing with them, negotiating with them, all that, really important, but it's easy compared to writing the book. So that's where my mind is drawn in terms of advice. And a good one I think that I've benefited from is to write daily or close to it during your biorhythm peak. And what does that mean? There's in humans, there's 2 out of 3 of us are morning larks, so to speak. That's the colloquialism. And then 1 out of 3 are evening, owls. That's when you just have the most alertness, concentration, focus, energy. 2 out of 3 is in the morning. Already, just from me having said that, which you are. And so I try to guard that time. For me, it's morning. I guard it. I try not to teach during that, go to meetings during that, etc. And during that, block, it's usually a couple hours in the morning. That's for writing. And it's for writing whether I feel like it or not. And so that's been real helpful to me to think about it that way.
I'd say fact check. Proofread and fact check. There's no bigger group of nerds in the world than music nerds. And if you make a mistake in music writing, drawing cartoons of the Prophet has nothing to compare with the kind of anger that you excite. I wrote a piece in the Washington Post about the Dylan Newport concert where he played electric, not for the first time, as everyone says, but it was one of the early times, and there was a big scandal. And I wrote he plugged in his Stratocaster into the my computer blew up. People running in, "You idiot! That wasn't a Stratocaster, that was a Telecaster." And they would send these grainy, blown up photos, and you can see the buttons here. It's not a Stratocaster. And Dylan said in Chronicles, his own autobiography, he had a Stratocaster. So I wasn't prepared for that, but I had my facts. And of course that was just response to something that's already written. But there couldn't be any bigger turnoff for an editor than to have you turn in something that on the surface, the introductory email, the tap on the office door. If there are mistakes there, go back and get them out before they happen. You don't have fact checkers on your staff, do you? Yeah, can't some of those people who arrange contracts check facts as well? Yeah. Facts are horrible.
Yeah, that's what reference librarians are for, is to check facts. Not having published a book, you can take this for what it's worth, but my one piece of advice would be to consider open access publishing, even for monographs. And a lot of you may have heard of open access publishing. I wonder if I could take a show of hands. Actually, quite a few, maybe half the room. So open access publishing simply means publishing that's freely available to the world immediately online in digital format. There are a number of tremendous advantages to that kind of thing, particularly in this day and age, and particularly in the field of scholarly monograph publishing. Library budgets are being squeezed to breaking point and have been for decades now. And as a result of that, that's usually the rising cost of scholarly journals. And so as a result of that, they can purchase fewer and fewer monographs each year. Sometimes the print runs of a traditional scholarly monograph might only be like 200, 300, and by ignoring the open access options that are out there, you might seriously limit your readership. And I'll just mention like a few platforms that have emerged over the past couple of years. In particular, the University of California Press has been a pioneer in this regard. They recently launched their Luminous Platform. It's quite impressive. I encourage you all to check it out online. But the idea is that they are funding the publishing process through fees paid by certainly subsidies to the publisher, but also author and institutional fees, and everyone, and libraries as well. And everyone pitches in order to make the work openly available to the world. And it can, I think, dramatically, I think the science shows, the studies that have been done so far show pretty well that this can dramatically increase your readership and the impact and visibility of your work. Oh, the library could definitely help you in terms of identifying reputable open access publishers. Was that the question? Well, that's why I would recommend publishing with an outfit like the University of California Press. They have they devote, or they promise to devote exactly the same peer review process to the work, exactly the same marketing and design processes, and if anything, they can leverage digital marketing to spread the word further afield than they could with traditional print monographs. Oh, sure. The question was, how do you get the word out about an open access monograph?
So, Devon, actually, the next question is for you. You might still have to repeat my question.
Okay.
So you can speak a little bit about, I know you've talked some already, but can you talk about like where the library can fit into all of this and resources that we should be aware of?
Sure. I think that'll just be a recap of the comments I've made so far. Essentially, the library's positioned as or trying to position itself as a key research partner in being able to advise and assist with the entire life cycle of the research process. So that can start from the inception of your great idea, assistance with that early form of research, but then also assistance all the way along through the life cycle in terms of selecting, and now coming around to the subject matter of this panel discussion, in terms of selecting appropriate publishers, in terms of fact checking, and assisting with the creation of proposals and that kind of thing. If you're publishing a book about hard scientific research and you have data and so on that you're reporting on, we have a fabulous data research librarian named Renee Julian, who's an expert in a variety of issues related to research data and the management of it, the curation of it, that kind of thing, and then all the way along down the line to academic publishing, advising on reputable platforms that you might, or from publishers that you might consider approaching in order to maximize the impact and readership of broaden the readership of your research.
Okay, so we're going to now open it up to the audience. And so if any of you all have questions. Yes. I'll repeat the question, yeah. So the question was about promotion and what publishing houses have done and what the faculty here have had to do for themselves.
Yeah, this is probably an area I'm weak in. I've left this always to the publishing house to do. I haven't done a lot of promotion on myself, by myself, but they put books in their catalogs, and they, display them at conferences, and they, send out mailings and push them to people in my field. So I should do more, but I never seem to have time.
Well, it can take a lot of time. It can be engrossing, a full-time job even, if you do it that way. I haven't done it either very much in terms of direct sort of self-promotion of the books. But what's happened is that it's sort of a bunch of different professional activities have scaffolded one another. Like writing a book has led to giving a lot of talks in different forums, has led to consulting work with business and especially with lawyers. And then that's given me ideas for another book, and then so forth and so on. And in the process of that, a lot of word gets out about the book. So that's the most I've done in terms of direct promotions. The presses are variable in terms of how good they are at this, I think. And I don't know how to predict in advance which will be good and which won't, other than their track record in the past. So I guess I'll stop there.
Yeah, presses are all over the place, and you can tell when it's somebody's first book when they come into your office red face and steam pouring out of their collar, and they say, well, XYZ Press is not doing anything to publicize my book, and you say, well, get used to the world. And they're ones that buy full page ads in the New York Times Book Review, and they're ones that they send out a catalog. The press for Crossroads, a very small press, and as I say, I talked to them about buying some ads, but how many ads do you look at, and you do nothing. So I started putting little snippets from the book up on Facebook. Otis Redding died today. He died in 1967 when his plane crashed. So this morning I got up and I put up a post talking about when he was. It was the spring before he died. He went to Jamaica. He was very popular in Jamaica, and walked into a club where Bob Marley was playing, and Bob Marley said later he was like a god when he walked in, and Bob Marley began to play These Arms of Mine with a kind of a chicka-chaka ska beat to it. It's just a beautiful moment in music history. There are all kinds of ways to brag, and the thing that people do on Twitter or Facebook is say, thrilled and humbled to be, honorable mention winner. Get out of here, But I hope by putting out little bits of things to read. Did you know that Enrico Caruso was responsible for the LP because he signed with the company that made LPs? He had a choice of signing with them or with the Thomas Edison wax cylinder, and he said that thing is no good. I want the vinyl. So just there are little things out there that people will be interested in, and it's really about being gregarious. I mean, that might be a kind of an underlying theme of what we're talking about here. You're going to conferences, talking to people, staying up, and I guess being a hermit works for some people, but not in this racket.
Thanks, David. I don't think I have a whole lot to add there. Yeah.
But you are going to start a book publicity office in the library very soon. Libraries have changed, haven't they?
The library could, as dealing with books, know what publishers are
Sure. I think the question was presumably the library and the subject specialists at the library, being experts in acquisition of books, would have, and being catered to by publishing houses, would have a pretty good handle on the extent to which different publishing houses go in order to promote new publications. So again, I would highly encourage you, if you're just thinking about book publishing and just getting into this and you don't have a track record yet, do schedule a consultation with your subject specialist. I think you'd find it very valuable.
And it goes without saying that if you make money, they'll do whatever you want. You know, I cackle every time I open up the New York Times book review because there's almost always a full-page ad in there for the latest Daniel Steele novel, and Daniel Steele will never be reviewed in the New York Times book review. And it's always Umberto Eco and Primo Levi and first-rate literary fiction and nonfiction writers, but I got the feeling that at that house they love Danielle because she makes truckloads of money for them. About making money, that's something I don't think any of us could really talk about, but because happily the kind of publication we're talking about is at least partly for money and partly for love, but you got to get the love out there. You have to talk it up.
I guess just the only other thing I would say is that is a discussion you can have with editors. How are you going to promote my book? What are you going to do for me? Why should I publish with you and not with somebody else? And see what they have to say.
So I saw your hand first. Yes.
This is something Devon just kind of mentioned very quickly
Mhm.
earlier, and that is the role of the peer review process in publishing. I know it's true with some books and it's not true with other books. It's true with some publishers and it's not true with others. And I wondered if you all could comment on that and also maybe on whether we in academia should pay them if we're going to publish a book.
So the question was about peer review and the so what about the peer review.
Right. So peer review is great for academia, right? When we're putting together our CVs and we can say that it was a peer-reviewed book, that gives us more notches on our belt. My books have typically been peer-reviewed after they've already been bought, and after they've already been written, they've gone out for peer review. It's never, it's like any kind of peer review in my experience. You'll get back a range of responses, and some of which you might want to think about and incorporate into your manuscript, and others which may not make very much sense in terms of the book that you were trying to write. And it's possible to make your case on that. I guess that's a general thing about dealing with editors, whether it's peer-reviewed journal articles or books, that you don't have to just say yes to everything that comes back. If you have a reason, you can still get your piece published without necessarily making all of the suggested changes. So it's good, for us in academia to have peer-reviewed books, but I wouldn't not publish something just because it wasn't peer-reviewed. At least at this point, I wouldn't. I'd be open to it.
I think in some disciplines, people are writing books, peer-reviewed books, as at least partly as a means to an end to promotion and tenure, things like that. So in that case, I think it matters an awful lot. But then in other disciplines, that's not really the key to promotion and tenure, and so you might just want to do it because you want to do it. In that case, I don't know that it matters as much. It tends to make it better for everybody, I think, especially if the reviewers are doing what they're supposed to do, doing their job. The only other thing I'd add to it is that a lot of things I'm doing in psychology, and this is basically at three places, Harvard, Oxford, and Yale, the prospectus is getting peer reviewed. Like the proposal, the 20, 30 page, whatever proposal is getting peer reviewed. And I actually kind of like that because, I don't have to go 500 pages in before I know what, these guys are going to say or these people are going to say. So that you could probably ask for that. If it's not already happening in different disciplines, you could probably ask for it and it might help. I don't know. I've benefited from that for sure.
It's a minority opinion, but every once in a while you'll see a piece arguing against peer review because they say it's the people who've been doing the same thing over and over again, and they want to keep it within those boundaries. But when you look back, when you've done this a little bit of time as I have, you'll probably do a little bit of everything. I mean, I feel that on one hand, I'm the Robert O. Lawton Professor of English, and on the other hand, I'm a freelance writer, and there's only one word in the freelance writer's vocabulary, and that's yes. And so I've got books from trade presses, and then books from presses that are pretty much one guy in his garage, with everything in between, a lot of magazine publication, online publication, and you just you do different things and look at try to manage your resources as best you can. And I think it's probably better to be a person who says yes more than no, because I can think of people who have missed out on opportunities because they were kind of reaching for the gold ring and they never got that. The wise old Italians have an expression: the best is the enemy of the good. Il meglio è il nemico del bene. The best is the enemy of the good, and you always want to try to do the best, but every once in a while you need to grab hold of the good thing as well, because you're going to be in this for a long time.
Thanks, David. I think my fellow panelists summed it all up. I think in particular Tom hit the nail on the head in terms of the importance of peer review. If it's essential for promotion and tenure in your discipline, then it's going to be of paramount importance. But perhaps if you're exploring the more creative forms like the novels and poetry and so on, then it's not as important.
And no one has talked about the horror of being the peer reviewer. Just this last week, a press sent me a book of poetry that somebody worked on for a long time, and I thought it was like language, intelligently organized, but it was just flat, and I hated to say so because I knew I was breaking somebody's heart, but that press, we have to manage our resources. The press has to manage theirs, and I'm pretty sure they could come up with a better book.
I'm an archaeologist who's a scientist trying to make that leap. I'm now working on a cave that has mirrors and trying to jump from Science magazine to something that people would be interested in reading and actually get it into classrooms and things like that. And one of the ways that I see that this could be done is more illustrations and online editions, web page that would go along with this. And I'm really finding that it's a problem with the publishers. I guess just trying to hold down the cost. They see these things as being more costly. And then the problem of long-term housing of a web page and things like this. And just finding that I'm hitting a wall of making this interesting.
So the question is about like creating a web page and how, or having it like supplement and make it more interesting.
I was wondering, I don't know what my question is, but and we're also for one outlet trying to do an ebook or plan an ebook, going to the next level in publishing, and I'm really having a lot of trouble with this.
So the question is about how to take the publishing to the next level, web pages, ebooks.
As it comes down.
Okay. Well, this is something I've grappled with a little bit, because there is something nice about being able to put supplemental materials on the web, not have it be part of the actual book, but let people have access to it. The tussle there that I'm familiar with is, okay, that's a great idea. Now who's going to maintain it? Who's going to support it? Who's going to pay for it? And I always feel like that should be the publisher, and I think the publisher usually thinks that should be me. So I haven't done that. But as far as things going into ebooks, it seems like they go into different editions all at the same time. So it comes out simultaneously as a hard book and as an ebook and as a paperback, and so that I'm seeing as more and more common these days. But you still might be able to negotiate all of that, your website.
When you're talking about making science interesting to the general audience, our colleague in biology, he's a law professor too, Walter Schinkel, his book on fire ants, if you've ever seen that, or you might want to take, it's an example, I think, of exactly, maybe not the web part of what you're asking about, but everything else. It's a great example of that because it's exactly what you said, taking that decades-long research program, scientific research program on fire ants and making it into some, like an epic story that I thought was incredible, full of photographs and all these kinds of other things. So maybe talk with Walter and take a look at his book, because I think that's a great example of kind of what you're talking about.
Which sounds like a version of what I was going to say, which is that sometimes you find yourself writing different ways for different audiences. I was in an editor's office once, and he was looking at something, and he said, "You know, David, you're a professor, but you can write." And I think I know what you mean by that, because I wasn't writing, in academic language. But for somebody else, and this is something I actually teach in my class, and to my surprise, when I first started doing it, I found out that kids could not do it. They all knew how to write in the MLA style. They all knew how to write in the APA style or some other kind of style manual style. But I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to write the way people do for Slate, for Rolling Stone, for Salon, for Huffington Post, for Atlantic Monthly. And they said, well, what do you mean by that? And they said, well, you write from a personal point of view. And they said, well, they told us never use first person. No, I want you to do that. It's okay. And so then they would write, I really hate the Transformer movies. No, don't say you hate. Talk about interview people and get their opinions on the. It flows through you, but you're still looking at you're looking at the world from a a viewpoint that is personal, but it's not it's not emotional. It's not silly. And I often have them read the op-ed columnists from the New York Times, Thomas L. Friedman, Nicholas Kristof, Paul Krugman, David Brooks, Maureen Dowd, Gail Collins. Those, if you've ever read a Paul Krugman college, he's an economist, right? And he's explaining, the debt ceiling, something that we don't understand. And he'll say, what do I mean by this? New paragraph. Let me explain. There are 3 things you need to know. And he'll do it like that, and you finish the thing, and you're going to forget it 10 minutes later. But for a moment, you say, well, look, I'm reading this, and I'm understanding. And I'm sure that Paul Krugman didn't get the Nobel Prize for writing that way for his colleagues. But, there's a Goldoni play called A Servant of Two Masters. And in fact, there are a lot of plays like that. Shakespeare made a mint by writing about how working class people have to please different masters. And I think writers do that as well. There's not one style that is you. Sometimes you reach into the toolbox and you pick up a hammer, and sometimes you reach in and pick up a saw.
Thanks, David. Those are excellent points about knowledge translation and speaking in terms that the crowd will understand, or that your audience will understand. Sort of circling back to some of the more digital web native aspects of your original question, I was so pleased when you asked that question because it brings up a growing trend towards like freedom and experimentation in the publishing space, specifically coming out of libraries. It's sort of called, I guess, library publishing, for lack of a better word, but it signifies the fact that many libraries are creating new units that they wouldn't have invested in 20 years ago. For instance, here at FSU, our office is called the Office of Digital Research and Scholarship, and I see Sarah Scott Shields actually in the crowd, and we've had discussions with her about like how do we move beyond the PDF? How do we incorporate, make full use of all of the affordances of the digital environment, and use open annotation tools so that readers are able to annotate and indeed debate and discuss particular sections and passages of works. We have it's something that we're just sort of discussing right now, and we're pursuing training in this area. We already have some expertise, but it's definitely an area that we're looking to become more active in. We'd love to have a prolonged conversation with you about your hopes for your work and how to make it more engaging by really taking advantage of all of the affordances of the digital age.
Well, I'd like to mention also that everyone has a web-page possibility.
Yeah.
Applied for mine. But is that through the library? I don't know when I applied
No. I mean, we yeah, I think there's a variety of ways that you could get a web page, and different kinds of web pages. Certainly at the library we have an open journal platform. So I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's web native publishing, and you would have your own sort of like instance of a website, or that's what it would appear to the average user. So we could help you create something of that nature. Okay, great.
Yeah, I would hate to be Devon's inbox, because tomorrow it's going to be bursting with all these questions, including from me.
Yes, sir. The question was about how the experience about working with co-authors.
Choose your co-authors carefully. I always say you don't really know somebody until you've lived with them, traveled with them, or written with them. You want to have people that you're compatible with, but who are also also interested in a quality product at the end of the day, and people you can rely upon. That they're gonna do what they say that they're going to do. It can be really frustrating to drag someone along who's promised you those pages and the pages just aren't coming. I don't particularly care for that. So, so I would say choose your collaborators well. When you have a good collaborator, it's so much fun. It's so much fun because you're always bouncing things off each other. You know exactly what you're both working on and what the issues are, and you're coming up with solutions, and it can really be a joy. When you're writing by yourself, you're on your own, and I've done books that way too. And I get up in the morning and I write, and I try to not have anything disturb that time. I really protect it. But with a co-author, you get pulled out into the world, you get pulled out into somebody else's mind, and it can make things better. There can be a synergy that occurs out of that's really positive. So I would say do it, but choose the person carefully.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. I think that kind of nails what I was going to say.
The most irritating co-author in the world is named Barbara Hamby. She and I put together an anthology of poetry a few years ago, and she's the best co-author too, because we fought tooth and nail over the 178 poems we had, and we did a lot of horse trading too. You can have that person if I can have this woman here. But it worked because she knew what she was doing, and that's such good advice. Know your co-author, because I lost a friend early in my career. He and I co-authored a book, and neither of us had ever done a book before, and he did not do his half, and he has done. Nice man, I'm sure. I guess I haven't been in contact with him, but he's never done anything really. I mean, he's one of those people who his highest evolutionary peak was completing his PhD. Second piece of advice is never edit or co-edit an anthology, because you have to get permissions from people and you have to pay them money. I spent 2 years thinking like a lawyer and an accountant, saying, we can't pay you $1,500 for that. How about 65? Okay, and we went back and forth like that. Permissions is a whole different bugbear when you're using other people's work. But I mean, just work with an experienced co-author, somebody who has already done the do already on their own time and their own work.
Nothing to add.
Yes.
I was wondering if you all could comment on one thing that you see changing in publishing in the next 4 to 5 years.
So the question was, what do you
Down to that.
what do you see changing in publishing in the next 5 years?
Maybe specifically on the
I think definitely there's going to be more ebooks. and more open source publishing. I think those things are growing and are here to stay. Absolutely.
I guess there used to be kind of a, I don't know, rule of thumb in the psychology circles that books are academic books are somewhat scholarly, somewhat academic books are either trade books, like popular books, or academic books. And you try to bridge those, and they used to resist it. It's like you got to do one or the other. And there's been several examples now. I'd suggest that some of my books are examples of this, where nevertheless we did it, and they're finally kind of coming around. That's a good thing, popularizing like Walter did in the Fire Ant book. I've tried to do in some of my work on mental health problems, but still being scientific and scholarly. I think you can do it. It's hard. You got to work at it, but it's doable. And so I think that's going to be a trend. I hope it's a trend going forward in my particular field.
Maybe a word for that would be something like hybrid. Whenever I was asked that question when I was out on the road somewhere, it was always easy to just turn around to a whiteboard and write a hierarchy that it works like this in terms of descending order of prestige. There are trade books, university press books, small press books, co-op books produced by several people working together, self-published books, and then vanity press, and that's just obsolete now because of so many things that are going on. My brother-in-law just published a crime book, a mystery of some kind that through one of those Amazon platforms, but he had to send out chapters and get something like 5,000 people to vote him into that thing. So it's not self-publication. There's no name for what he's doing. And of course, we're going to see more things that we can just get with the tap of a couple of keys on a keyboard. 10 years ago, online publication was very unsavory in the arts, in fiction, in poetry, and art journals. And then it just gradually took over. One thing people liked about it is you could say, did you see my latest poem in Field? No. Well, you can go over to take your pajamas off and put your clothes on and get your car and go to a Starbucks and get a coffee and go to the library and go up 3 flights and try not to get shot, and find the latest copy of Field. And now you can just say, I'll send you a link, and there it is right there. And what's something that's really interesting to me is that a lot of these old school magazines like Kenyon Review, Gettysburg Review, Shenandoah, ones that have been around for decades, now have both platforms. You can see, you can go out and check it and pick it up in the library. You can look through a sneezy paper archive with dusts on the top, or you can pull up a certain amount of it at least online. So you see more and more things crunching and coming together. And now to Devon Sober for the correct answer.
Hardly. I think fantastic points all around. I certainly see open access publishing as being a tremendous force over the next 5 to 10 years. I think that if you look at the numbers and if you look at what governments and research funders are doing in terms of mandating and requiring forms of openness, whether it's open access journal article publication or open research data, I think that the trends are definitely pointing in that direction, and the benefits can't be ignored. I mean, as David was just saying, the immediacy of being able to access something immediately online for free with no barriers, not just time related, but also related to socioeconomic status and class and that kind of thing, is just a tremendously powerful thing. And I think that there's no way that can't win out in the end. So I definitely see that. I've also spoken a little bit about some of the ways of making full use of all of the affordances of the digital environment, open annotation software, new modes of and models of peer review. So, for instance, many publishers are experimenting with post-publication peer review and ranking and rating systems as a way to separate the wheat from the chaff, kind of thing. So that's one area of experimentation that I see, or that I expect will become more common and prominent over the coming years as well. Thanks.
So we'll take one or two more questions. Yes. Oh, well, then there's 2 questions. Uh-huh. So the question for Devon was regarding like using images within books, and the question for Dr. Kirby was about like whether the advice was the same for fiction.
I need to make something up, so I'll pass it on to Devon.
Thanks for asking that question, Gloria. I absolutely can, and myself and my colleagues at the library definitely can help with providing information and support around image clearance. In a past life, I was a copyright librarian at the University of British Columbia, so I have a lot of experience with rights clearance and obtaining permissions from publishers, from individuals, from organizations, the whole archives and museums and so on. So I can definitely provide information and support around that. Indeed, we'll be having a copyright institute, or an institute on copyright in higher education, the day after the academic publishing symposium I was mentioning. So save the date of February 25th and 26th. On the 26th, we'll be flying down a speaker from Harvard, their copyright advisor there, and he'll be giving a keynote presentation. And one of our panel discussions will be on using images in publications and in teaching as well. So I highly encourage you to come to that, and indeed to get in touch with me if you need assistance with clearing images for your book.
I probably shouldn't have waited because I made up an answer, Gloria, but I'm not sure it's to your question again. Would you tell me your question, then I'll restate it for the camera? They should try to get a contract first. Yeah. Because the person it's a poker game, and the person you're playing poker with, a publisher or an editor, is going to want, they love you and they love your work and they want the best for you, but they're going to want things to their advantage, and you do too. And it's just it's talk, and as I said, talk to more than one person at once.
And you'll be our last question. So the question was about like what is the process for cold calling, and how does that look?
Yeah, I agree with David. Email works really well. I've had a situation where I emailed someone I knew we were both going to be at the same conference and set something up. Make an appointment of a kind, cup of coffee or something, to speak in person. That's worked very, very well. But I like email because I think it's always a little startling, to me anyway, when I pick up the phone and it's not someone I know. And what is this? So that having that little buffer, I think, is a good idea.
Yeah, and you can find the email of the acquisitions editor in your particular area. Like some of these bigger publishers I've mentioned, they've got their one division does stuff like in psychology, and then within that, there's people who kind of handle the mental health part, and within that there are a couple acquisition editors, and so kind of doing the websites tend not to give those names up immediately. You have to kind of dig down into them pretty far. It's frustrating actually, but it's worth it to do, and it's there, and then you get that email, and that's the one to go for, versus the one that'll pop up first. You can see who it is, will be too high up an editor to listen much to cold call emails often. So my main advice on this is digging down into those websites and find the most relevant topic-specific acquisitions editor you can and email that person.
Of course, those people that you want to talk to are often at those meetings, and there are people standing around, so it's a good place.
Are we going to give valedictory remarks, or is this walk out? Oh, are we done? Okay, because I was going to. The only remaining thought I want to say is, you're going to be those of you who are just starting out on this. You're going to be doing it for a long time. I mean, to sit there and have no book is, it just seems like an eternity. And you look back and you have 3. You say, wait a minute, this is pretty much of a a start on a career here, and it just keeps going and going and going. And when I left the library a little while ago, there were 2 students were sitting at a table, and one was saying to the other, you are your resume. And I said, I'm not my resume. And he said, yes, you are. You're your resume. And I got a little bit too close, and they got self-conscious, and they shut up. I'd really like to know, the answer to that question. But when you look back, I think, you are your books. I mean, you are your publications. You're a lot of things. You're your family. How your spouse, children, friends reflect on you. You are your undergraduates and your graduate students. But when I look back on my books, there's some that are better than others. Some I like more. Some sold well. Some just disappeared immediately. But they are me. They're all me. So pick them carefully and write them carefully. It's sort of like prayer. It's like praying. You pray and you don't know how your prayers are going to be answered, or B, when your prayers are going to be answered, but they're going to be answered, and it's going to be answered in some kind of way that's ultimately, is defining of the person who prayed those prayers or who wrote those books. You want the mic back? Okay.
Devon was going to say, we have a prayer archive. So you don't have any original prayers.
Right. The library can help with the prayer archive. Yeah, it's one of their new services. So the Office of Proposal Development just wants to thank you all for coming. We really do appreciate it. And thank you so much to our wonderful panelists. We really, really appreciate you all being here and giving such wonderful advice. 2 things. There are cookies to go, so please take a cookie for the road. And also, we're always looking for ways to improve our workshops, different workshops that we can provide that will be helpful. And so we have feedback forms out there on the counter. Also, Beth is holding them in the back. Please take one. You can fill them out here and give them back to us, or you can mail them back to our office. And thank you again so much. We really, really appreciate it.